I think one of the big opportunities we're focusing on is, as you mentioned, the cross-selling opportunity that we are very keen on. Is huge in our industry. We as Krishna mentioned, the lifetime value was so important, and typically people just look at the lifetime value of one product. Like, oh, they're purchasing it on repeat every 3 months. They're using our eardrops every 3 months, and it's on the subscribe and save, and we go. But what about complementary products that work well or as part of a regime or routine? And that is such an exciting space for us. AMC is allowing us to delve into that along with other tools, including your own, which allow us to kind of see, okay, this lifetime value was a whole lot bigger than we first anticipated and thought of. How could we be doing more here?
What's up, everyone? Welcome to another one. You all know me, Teja, head of e-commerce growth here at Trellis. And today we're going to get into something that's been top of mind lately for me and a lot of the people I've talked to as well, in terms of whether it be healthcare brands and how, in general, CPG brands are actually navigating ads on Amazon, right? It's a noisy space, competitive, full of red tape, and yet some of the brands are breaking through. And today I've got two killer founders here with me who live and breathe this stuff, whether it's working with healthcare brands, building technology, and the whole e-commerce space, right? And we're going to unpack what's working, what's not, and what's next. And so, kind of getting into it, we're going to start off with Ash here, who is a customer of ours who's been with us for since day one almost of us starting our journey. And we wouldn't be here without Ash. I'd say I'd like to call him a great friend of ours as well. And so, starting with you, Ash, here, tell us about World Products and what you're seeing with healthcare brands on Amazon right now.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Teja. Just checking you can hear me clearly. Everything's good.
Yep.
So essentially, World Products, we have been in the Amazon game for well over a decade now, specializing in, as you mentioned, the healthcare and CPG industry, working with some of the largest conglomerate brands around the world through to very small but promising and up and coming brands. We've really seen the breadth of what's going on in the healthcare space. And uh, many years ago, we took the initiative and we took the focus that we knew this healthcare space would be booming on Amazon soon to come. And these were in the days when typically you would choose Amazon for products that were outside of this category. So certainly in the European market in particular, people would typically be buying books, people buying music, stationery maybe. But when it came to healthcare, there was a kind of a lack of trust and awareness that you could even buy some of these products on Amazon. So we've really seen the full evolution there. And we went full in focused to help kind of handhold brands in this space through the whole process.
Cool. Exciting stuff there. And so now kind of teeing up here, Krishna, from the ad tech side and everything that we do here at Trellis, the man behind it on the product side. You work with a lot of brands. You've seen a lot of brands here. And so what's your take on the healthcare brands and how they approach advertising relative to the other verticals that we work with as well?
Before we get into that, Teja, you like to just blame me for everything. That's one thing I'm learning. I'm sure some of what we do has your fingerprints all over it. Going to your question, Teja, I think I look back at the 5 or so years of Trellis, and it was very interesting when we started to work with Ash. Hello, Ash, by the way. We did have a 5-minute conversation beforehand. When we started to work with Ash and World Products, one thing I realized was the amount of focus that Ash brought to his business and his accelerator, and focusing all of his energy on healthcare, which was a very interesting niche at that point in time. It wasn't necessarily as big. The niche was phenomenal, and there was some learnings there. There were learnings around what was really important to a healthcare or a CPG brand. How, to a certain degree, there were some healthcare brands and CPG brands that were advertising on Amazon, but there were lots that were not, and there were concerns around some of the points that Ash, you like to bring up around how do you maintain good brand identity? How do you make sure there aren't resellers? There were a lot of issues in the healthcare world, and there were concerns around how should a brand approach a CPG or healthcare brand approach Amazon? When it comes to the advertising strategy, if we zoom in onto the advertising strategy, what we typically see is it's a brand's desire to grow its market share. At the end of the day, there is an opportunity there to grow your market share. And healthcare brands typically tend to have slightly higher budgets than some other categories. And their ability to focus on the full funnel advertising strategy, their ability to, some of the advanced brands, their ability to understand how LTV and CAC impacts their business, and also recognizing sometimes that as strong as some of these brands are, the brand awareness can sometimes cause stagnation if you're not careful on how you advertise on Amazon.
And so kind of painting the picture here, Ash, we'll start with you, but in terms of kind of what Krishna was saying and building brand identity and essentially trying to grab market share with all the healthcare brands that you work with, what are some things that you're seeing in terms of how they're trying to capture this market share, right? How are they spending across the board?
Yeah, that's quite the question, Teja. So there is a lot going on in this space, and I think let's start in the first instance of how they got introduced into the digital Amazon sphere, because that was new to them. Firstly, with the brands we work with, and rightfully so, they were very traditional in their patterns on advertising and so on. It's exactly what you expect. But I feel healthcare really lags behind the rest of the other categories in adoption to e-commerce and healthcare. I think trust was a big part of that. Right, again, I say rightfully so, because once upon a time, the internet was the Wild West. There was a lot of, unknown about it. Where brands took that is, if you launched onto Amazon in any way, you would automatically, just by default, if you're in a good brand, you had a good product and good category, be seeing growth year on year. So naturally, they just expected sales to come through, and they thought, this is our brand growing, we're succeeding. And to some extent, yes, maybe there was some overflow of offline marketing coming into Amazon, and customers were now buying on Amazon. So there was growth. But this was kind of misinterpreted as growth. And what we've seen brands now see more and more of is they actually saw and realized, and we've been doing a lot of work with brands to be open about this, and saying, actually, your category was growing already by 20% year on year. And you're seeing a sales of maybe 18% or something like that. So you're doing okay. And these are for the more mature brands at this level of growth, which is still strong for them. Typically, they wouldn't see that in offline retail. So they're very, very happy with 18% growth or these kinds of numbers at mature level. And they would be taking that as growth, and we are doing well. And we are now unpacking that. We've been doing this for many years now, unpacking that and saying, actually, your market is growing by 20%. You are growing by 18%. So you are actually losing market share to kind of new players that are coming into the market, or other brands that are taking this space more seriously and actually growing their market share. Just like a wake-up call saying, don't just look at the kind of top-line data and think things are going in the right direction. Look under the hood. And I think, and we're seeing this more and more across the board with brands we work with brands we're speaking to, that they are taking this more seriously, and they're now looking under the hood. And they're realizing, okay, we've got a more serious problem. This could be a brand awareness, a brand knowledge. Certainly, premium brands, they're struggling with this. And we're now seeing brands looking to advertising as a science and thinking, okay, how can we actually not just do things just to make our bosses happy, but actually think about growth, think about things more logically. And I'm sure we'll get into more of that later on. But that's the kind of stuff we're seeing in the market.
And then Krishna,
Ash,
I guess
do you see?
Oh, go ahead, Krishna.
Go ahead. I was just gonna have a quick follow-up, Ash. Ash, do you see that as when you think of the 20% growth that brands were seeing, was that a shift of the market from traditional brick and mortar stores to online, or were you seeing an additional incremental growth that was getting driven online?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think there's no doubt there was some kind of movement away from the bricks and mortar to Amazon. Certainly, if we go back to 2020, 2021, there's an obvious time where customers were certainly choosing other options. Those that were once afraid of Amazon were now almost forced to use Amazon when everything else had queue or so on. So there was definitely that transfer, but that was more of a catalyst, and we are seeing that there is more growth opportunity within Amazon. Customers are, there's quicker conversion, faster conversion. They have this trust and affiliation with Amazon compared to, own D2C websites and so on. So I'd say it's a healthy blend of everything. But that whole transition of bricks and mortar to offline has kind of slowed down. To online has slowed down now. Anything that's really happening is now kind of the truth of the market. So we're saying that's what we're seeing, and more of a.
I think that's kind of where what we are seeing too, the easy growth or the shift, the market share that you can grab when there is a tendency or a shift of shoppers from brick and mortar or traditional retail onto online. That shift and the easy growth that brands can achieve, I think that all has played out. And now, as you said, you got to get under the hood. You start to understand what is really going on to drive the incremental market share growth, which requires a bit more thoughtfulness and what have you.
100%, Christian. And on the same token, I wouldn't take the easy growth as an easy win. At the end of the day, the brands that embraced Amazon the quickest in terms of even making sure its presence was, protected and everything was done in the right way, even down to like things like A+ content, premium A+. That was them forward thinking. And again, on the same token, now the most forward thinking brands who will succeed in the future and hold market share are the ones that are looking under the hood, looking at advertising tools, looking at things that other brands simply aren't doing and how we can outflank them. So if a brand keeps that mentality, they will succeed.
Yeah. And we can probably keep going at this stage. We'll give the control back to you. Otherwise, Ash and I will probably.
No, I think everything you guys are talking about is all very fascinating and interesting, especially in, I think, the shift in consumer behaviors that we're seeing, and brands like you guys are saying, how do they approach things differently, right? And advertising can be very one-dimensional to a certain extent if you continue to do what everybody does, which is your sponsored product ads and whatnot. Right. And so if we look at what's not working and how do you differentiate yourself in this, right? How do you stop playing the same game that everybody is playing, which is paying to play, right? You all go after the same keywords. You're all going after the same people to a certain extent. And so, Krishna, when you look at it, especially whether it be healthcare brands or CPG brands in general, what gaps are you seeing in terms of their advertising approach?
I think that's probably a few hours of conversation, but I'll probably try to hit upon a couple of things here. I think when we onboard new healthcare or CPG brands, you see one of two things. You either see a world where brands have extremely healthy tacos, and I'm not a big ACOS fan and whatnot, but you see extremely healthy tacos, or you see on the other spectrum very poor tacos. And when you look at that world and you ask yourself what is possibly going on here, you typically find one of two things. What you find is, and I was hinting at that a bit earlier, where brand awareness causing stagnation. If you think about Tylenol as an example, if I'm looking for Tylenol and I'm going to Amazon, searching for Tylenol, odds are I'm very committed to that brand and what product they have to sell. And what you see with CPG brands or healthcare is sometimes that brand awareness is causing stagnation, which reflects as extremely healthy tacos and whatnot, and not as much effort put in the mid and upper stages of the funnel. So that world does not lend itself to a market share growth world. It lends itself to sustaining your market share and whatnot. Then on the other side, brands that are thinking about it from the lifetime value of a shopper and what is it costing them to acquire a new customer, and how much does that customer spend over their lifetime with that particular brand. Brands that are embracing that thinking, they tend to grow a bit more, gain a bit more market share, and then they're not afraid to spend the appropriate budget at the appropriate stage of the funnel.
And you ended there with something that's very interesting, Krishna, which is, to your point of the typical advertising in this space is everybody's focused on ACOS and driving efficiencies there. But in a category like CPGs, where a lot of it is about new to brand, driving those new customers, and then converting them, right? And then getting them to be more involved in the brand, especially in a healthcare world. And Ash, you probably see this time, right? Once you build trust with your consumer, they're going to always come back and buy that same product or a different product from that same brand. Right. And so when you go about and you talk to these brands, especially when you're trying to get new brands onto the Amazon world and get them there from the typical brick and mortar, what are some of the gaps that you're seeing in terms of how are you able to convince them to go onto the Amazon landscape? But then when you also bring them there, right, the biggest question they're going to ask is, how much do I need to spend? Right. And so how do you approach that game plan of saying, well, this is how much we're going to spend and this is why we're going to spend this. And this is what's going to get you that extra growth other than the natural growth that they're seeing.
Yeah. There's some really good points on that. So to your first point about how do we even convince them to come to Amazon, that game has shifted. Like that was a battle we used to fight many years ago. There's not too much in that anymore. A brand has to be on Amazon simply because there aren't many options in certain markets. Yes, you have certain offline retail stores, but the barriers to entry are incredibly high. The investment is incredibly high that it no longer makes any sense. So they're now seeing Amazon as not a nice to have, it's kind of the only option, really. And these are from some of the leading healthcare brands that have neglected Amazon for many years. Now, when it comes to the actual Amazon space, building on some of Krishna's great points about kind of the bottom of the funnel and the mid to upper funnel and the confusion there and over optimization almost of the lower funnel. We've been there, we've seen it. We have these discussions regularly about, they want their tacos low and so on. I think this is important in any category. So this isn't just healthcare specific, but it's truly valuable, as you mentioned. Brand matters because if you don't have the brand, you become a commodity, just like anything, right? This is, if you don't have the Coca-Cola brand, you're just another cola on the shelf. And this is happening more and more in healthcare, where because of that over optimization, which is leading to the stagnation that Krishna mentioned, many premium brands are now looking to other levers rather than advertising to grow. And in other categories, this can work. But if you are a premium brand, you really have to be careful about the pricing lever, especially in today's world where you have the inflationary pressures. You should not be going to that lever first, in my opinion, for most of these premium, to mid to premium brands, because at the end of the day, and I actually used this language recently, there will always be another brand around the corner that can be cheaper and more competitive than you. But what they don't have is they don't have the brand equity and maybe the clinical trust and knowledge there, right? Those are the pillars that are missing. So you need to lean into what you have and what you know, rather than going, can I sell this bundle for a few pence cheaper, or can I do this? That isn't it. So just kind of summarizing that, what we're really trying to push is making sure brands are pulling the right levers, especially where they are in the thing, focusing on actual brand building, going back to basics, traditional marketing. Like go back to a traditional marketing course and they say, you need this brand development, this brand equity. And that's the stage we're taking, but in the world with AMC involved. And I'm sure we'll touch on that a little bit later.
Yeah, and I think that's a good segue there, right? Especially in terms of with a lot of the data that's available on Amazon, I think AMC is the way to say, and it gives you a lot of those insights on the traditional marketing side, right? Is what is my brand equity? Who are my customers? Who are my people that I go afterwards? Where typically, if you think about the way the Amazon realm is, it's always been about keywords and going after TDPs and targets. But with the power of AMC, and I'll get Krishna to explain a bit more on why it's a game changer here. I think it allows you to take an approach that what Google and Facebook and a lot of these other guys are going towards, right? Is going after audiences and people and attaching that to your ads to get more emotionally connected with them, right? And just making sure that you're, at the end of the day, all you're doing is improving your conversion rates. And how do you do that outside of just going after those keywords? And so Krishna, teeing you up here, you're building a whole lot of cool stuff on AMC and trying to leverage that across different types of brands and different categories and verticals. Give us a little bit of a tidbit on why that's going to be the next evolution of ads on Amazon.
Yeah, but we'll get into AMC. I did want to touch upon one thing that Ash said. I think advertising is one lever one can pull. Ash mentioned pricing as another lever, but I could not agree more with Ash about brand building goes beyond that. And for healthcare brands or CPGs that have done extremely well, are brands who have looked at brand building as an entire activity, not just advertising and pricing or any one individual lever. And I think this is where, Teja, you may have passed on a very good opportunity to poke Ash a bit more about how he helps some of the CPG players build their brands, because they have developed some really cool techniques. I think it's probably worth a webinar of its own, but I'll go back to Ash, unless you want to add something on. I think sometimes it's what is lost, Ash, and you and I had this conversation before. Even unauthorized resellers, as an example, that is trust for a shopper, for a customer. Maybe it's still worthwhile, Ash, before we get into the AMC world. Maybe a couple of minutes on your perspective on what else does it take outside of advertising to launch a success or to launch your presence on Amazon, especially in healthcare industry.
Yeah, I mean, that definitely is worthy of another webinar, but it's kind of what we operate here at WP is on the three pillars, if I call them, of deliver, which is anything to its supply chain. So stock, inventory management, it's a huge part of what we do here. People say, oh, that's easy, but unless you're in that world, and certainly with CPG products, you don't realize the extent. And that goes down to batch code traceability, which is super important for some of these pharmaceutical brands in the healthcare space and even nutritionals, through to expiry date usage, making sure the customer is having a worthy amount of expiry date, especially when they're comparing to what they see offline. They need to make sure they trust everything that's going on Amazon. You touched on brand protection as well. So this is not just making sure there's no dodgy stock that you're receiving or non-compliant stock, but it could be making sure the language on the pack is correct. This time and time again, we've seen it. Stolen stock ending up on Amazon. We've seen every story under the sun. So it's kind of making sure that all comes holistically together, and bringing those worlds together. But for us, the piece we're working on currently, if you want an ear into what we're doing at WP as a focus point for the next few months, is the educational piece. So it ties into the advertising, but it stretches across your listings, across all the content. Is how can we make sure the customer is getting the correct education on the type of products? Because the type of products that we could be having could be from nasal sprays, could be to things such as specialist hair care treatments. Very intertwined to not just your general run-of-the-mill products, but very specialist. And it's making sure we're working with the brands to promote that education, because that leads to ultimately better conversions longer term and repeat purchasing, because they're bought into the product and why they're using it rather than just a quick buy. Yeah.
And you don't win that stage, tying it back to advertising. You don't win that by focusing at the purchase intent or the bottom of the funnel. You got to go higher up the funnel and drive that education and whatnot. So Teja, going back to your AMC question, I think AMC has been in some ways a game changer, no question about it. I think everybody in this industry has said enough about it. But when we look at whether it's AMC or Amazon ads and and Amazon retail signals, when we look at all of that, I think the question we need to ask ourselves is not what this data can do for us, but what is that we are trying to drive. And when I think about that, it really comes down to how do I bring more shoppers into my brand, number one. And number two, once they are with the brand, how do I increase the lifetime value, right? If I ask myself that question and I think about, say, lifetime value, it really comes from, I need to get the shopper to buy something from me. I can get some lifetime value from there. And then I can sell them other things that my brand has to offer. And I can sell them the same thing over and over again. Some of these things are, if I'm in a durable industry, it's very, very different than healthcare industry or CPG, that's where lifetime growth is going to come from. You cannot acquire a customer once, sell them something once and game over. It's very, very difficult to survive in that, because the customer acquisition cost in the healthcare or CPG industry is extremely high, extremely high. So then the question becomes, if I have to grow the lifetime value, what are the signals that tell me that I'm doing that and I'm doing that successfully? And we find that AMC can give you all those signals, whether that signal is about trying to understand if a shopper bought something from me, how frequently are they buying from me? Whether the signal is if they buy something from me, what else are they buying from me? Whether it's that signal, or whether the signal is if they are buying from me every 2 weeks, are they interacting with my ad the next time they're making a purchase, or they're doing subscribe and save, right? So all those signals can be brought together within the confines of AMC. And through that, now you can inform your brand building strategy, you can inform your advertising strategy, you can inform a whole bunch of other dimensions that are important for success on Amazon. That's just touching upon the lifetime value. Then when you think about acquiring, sorry, go ahead, Ash.
No, sorry, I just had a point on that, but sorry, just on the lifetime value piece, Krishna, and using AMC. Just if we take a second there, how do brands actually kind of get through the noise there of AMC? As you mentioned, everyone seems to be using it as the buzzword in our industry, and a lot of brands are trying to do AMC, and I think less than 1% are actually strategically using it to their advantage. What do you brush out to make it nice and simple for the brands?
I think what we found, Ash, was to always start with what is the business problem I'm trying to solve. Otherwise, it's easy to get lost in data, right? The trick is not to get lost in data. The trick is to say, hey, I'm trying to understand how do I grow my market share? And for me to do that, I need to grow more new to brand customers. Let's start with something as simple as that. Then how do I know overall? You can get some signals. If you look at advertising in isolation, you can get some signals on, is my advertising generating new to brand customer? You can look at that signal from either a sponsored brand ad or a sponsored display ad. But that's an advertiser focused signal. How do you look at the overall sales that you're getting and be able to say, I'm driving 60% of my sales new to brand? How do you look at that? Right. And that's where I think a platform like AMC can be extremely useful when it's integrated with the advertising signals, the retail signals, and that clean room can be very powerful in giving you that data back. That's one example, right? I wanted to touch upon maybe, and this may also lead to kind of where you're headed, Ash, is then if you think about the customer acquisition cost, everybody wants to acquire a customer at the cheapest price possible. And then you ask yourself, what am I paying today? And what are some ways I can improve my customer acquisition cost? And we do some of this work, and there are other people who do this work in the industry. You can bid optimize and all that kind of stuff. That's one part of that story. But where AMC comes into play is a lot of healthcare brands know their shoppers very well. They have been working with them, either it's in the traditional brick and mortar store, whether it is them selling directly to their shoppers or their consumers on their website. They are sitting on a gold mine of data that can be ingested into AMC. Now, ingesting that data into AMC for the sake of doing it is not the point. The question is, what do you then do with that data? So I bought this data in, what can I do with it? I think some things that impact your CAC as an example, and there are many, many things you can do. Let's talk about how do I improve my customer acquisition cost through maybe bringing in my 1P signals. Some examples of that are, I can take my 1P signals and say, Amazon is gold mine of shopper information. I can take all my 1P signals and say, hey, Amazon, tell me everybody else who looks like this particular audience. Right? So I can say, I know my shoppers on my D2C site have certain characteristics. They are at certain location, they are a certain age group, they have certain interests, and Amazon can balloon that into a bigger pool of lookalike audience, which then I can use in my sponsored product ads to say, I'm willing to pay more to get in front of these customers because they're more likely to convert for me. And suddenly you are able to optimize your CAC using AMC, and Amazon ad products together. So those are just a couple of examples. One of how can I use AMC to drive higher LTV, or how do I improve my CAC using AMC? Those are just a couple of examples, but we have a catalog of things that we look at when we are trying to help CPG brands or healthcare brands grow on Amazon.
And I think I'll add one more thing there, Ash, especially with one thing that you said at the tail end of what you're talking about, right? Is a lot of the things that you're doing right now is educating the customers and understanding that, right? And a lot of that comes down to a way to do that is your creatives aspect is very crucial to that educational, right? Because a lot of majority of the shoppers are buying mobile, right? A lot of that is going to be them browsing through the photos and the imageries there, not so much reading a lot of the text that's available. Right. And I think where some of this comes handy, especially on the AMC side of it, is right understanding the repeat purchase rates of certain product lines, right? So then you know that if people are buying every 30 days, that's going to be a key element that you want in your image, right? Saying this is a 30-day supply product. Or whether it's understanding a halo rank and a gateway and say, well, if someone buys a eye drop, they're actually going and buying contact lenses as well. Right. And so that's giving you your bundling opportunities and cross-sell opportunities. So especially when you're doing your premium A+ content, right, is shop other products within our catalog. Right. And so a lot of this is allowing you to educate your consumers as well in terms of what are the different products, what are the different things that the brand has to offer. Which kind of ties it back to what Kay was talking about is whether it's how do you improve your lifetime value, right? A lot of that is going to be how do you get more products coming in and people buying from the same brand, but also increasing your order values over time and doing that with trying to maintain a similar CAC, right? And so now you're improving your ratios as a whole, and that then improves your bottom line for the business, which at the end of the day, that's what everybody's trying to do is, right? How do we profitably grow as a result of this? And so you've been starting to use AMC in the last little bit here, Ash, for your brands. What are some of the things that you've found successful when you've been implementing for them?
Yeah, it's a great question, and that's actually why I asked Krishna about sifting through the noise, because for us that's been the biggest piece. There is so much information out there. There is so much that you can do with these tools, and we've seen time and time again brands come to us saying yes, they use AMC, and then we look under the hood, and there's been no strategic usage of it. It's just data. It's just data and information, but no real thing there. I think one of the big opportunities we're focusing on is, as you mentioned, the cross-selling opportunity that we are very keen on. Is huge in our industry. We as Krishna mentioned, the lifetime value was so important, and typically people just look at the lifetime value of one product. Like, oh, they're purchasing it on repeat every 3 months. They're using our eardrops every 3 months, and it's on the subscribe and save, and we go. But what about complementary products that work well or as part of a regime or routine? And that is such an exciting space for us. AMC is allowing us to delve into that along with other tools, including your own, which allow us to kind of see, okay, this lifetime value was a whole lot bigger than we first anticipated and thought of. How could we be doing more here? So there's a lot to unpack there, but essentially it's the use of education. So we're doing that a lot through our premium A+ content, through our visuals, our brand store, making sure we're showing, because a lot of people aren't aware that this product has a sister product that works very well with it. And, you need to be doing a 3-step routine and regime and these kinds of things. So we're working on the educational piece and then using the advertising and the AMC to sift between there and grow that. And then we're using the data to work with our brands to essentially work for more budget, because now that CAC goes a lot further. And when you're comparing it to what the lifetime value is, you realize actually the lifetime value is 2 to 3 times what you first anticipated on. So a lot of exciting stuff, but we just need focus, as we always do. What are we trying to do? We'll achieve one thing at a time for each of our brands.
And in terms of the data side,
and I think I'll
no, go ahead, Kay.
Go. No, I was just going to say, I think a lot of times we just find that it is, for a lot of brands, it's a struggle to even understand what is their LTV and they are doing all their advertising activity and whatnot, and is it actually helping them grow their LTV? Right? If you don't even have eyes on that, it becomes really, really difficult to figure out what.
Still, did you cut out for me? Okay, we lost you there for a bit.
You keep going. Looks like my Wi-Fi is acting up a bit, so keep going.
Okay, we lost you there, but I think Ash, what Kay was trying to say there, I guess, is a lot of this is how do you actually know what the right LTV is? How do you know what the right CAC is? And how do you get all that data, right? And tracking that becomes very difficult, but I think understanding that becomes very important because that's what drives a lot of your strategy, right? And then it's the feedback loop that gets created, right? Across, well, once you know the lifetime value that you're trying to hit for, and you know the CAC that you need to optimize for, well, for you to optimize your CAC, you got to tie that to your ad side of it, right? Because a lot of the big portion of your CAC is going to come down to your ad spend to a result, right? But now once you have that and you see the data play out, you see how your ads play out and the conversion rates play out, well, you got to kind of continue that loop back and say, well, how do I improve my conversion rates, right? Because the CAC is going to be the CAC, right? The bid's going to be the same bid. Everybody, there's no way you're really going to optimize that other than a plus minus couple points there, right? So if I'm going after the same keywords and the same people, how do I leverage the educational part to say, this is why you need to optimize, right? And so let the data feed the creatives and the education and kind of let that tie that back into your ad strategy. And then all in all, what you're tracking then is my lifetime value and everything growing? And am I able to do that at similar CAC? Or if anything, I'm actually able to improve my CAC, right? Because what you're trying to do is, because you're building that brand equity, right? A key metric is, are my branded searches increasing over time? Right? Are people knowing and coming into the brand more so? And so as a result, you can actually spend less on ads, right? So then you go down.
And I think what we're seeing is a lot of brands have been fighting at the bottom of the funnel. I mean, Krishna mentioned this right at the start of the webinar. Like, a lot of them are fighting at the bottom, penny punching there. And the best brands we're seeing are taking a step back, realizing it takes a little bit more upfront investment. Upper funnel is not the cheapest to start with, but outflanking everyone else, letting them all fight over here, even the big brands, letting them fight over here, outflanking them, even if you've got a smaller budget over a longer period of time, outflanking them. And then, as you say, monitoring the success there, and they will see conversion rate improvements. They will see increase in branded searches, things that other brands just don't see on the uptrend. And it's like anything. You've got to take that step back and think, how can we be doing things differently? Because what is it? We're not going to be fighting over the same keywords for the next 10 years. That is not the strategy for any brand building.
Correct. And I think in that way, I genuinely believe AMC is a game changer. You're absolutely correct. It's extremely difficult to action. But if you have, and I'm not trying to give myself a plug here, but if you have a platform that allows you to see some of these things very clearly and action it, I genuinely believe it's a game changer.
Yeah, that's it. And sorry, just one more piece there. We work a lot with marketing departments and finance departments of these companies, right? So we see the way the politics works in these organizations. These are large scale organizations, and they're not structured just for the sake of it. They're structured because that's how they've been built. And what we're finding more and more of is the finance teams are having more of an influence on the way budget is being spent, because like any organization in the world at the moment, there's a lot of cost structures. I'm sure everyone's feeling it in the way of how can we be more optimized and more strategic. And I understand it. But what we risk doing is the marketing departments being run by the finance directors. And that is a real risk, because that leads to over-optimized tacos. That leads to the wrong very myopic decisions being made. So we need to take a step back and think, okay, if we empower the marketing department with more data, at the end of the day, they've been missing data. How can I run a TV ad? I have no data. I can't justify it. But with AMC, they're empowered with data, which satisfies finance directors and think, actually, okay, we're not going to measure this on tacos or ROAS. We're going to measure this proportion on quality of impressions, information, that all the data that we
Correct.
talk about from AMC.
Right.
And that is the way we avoid the finance directors running the marketing departments, which is a real threat in these organizations.
Yeah, it's about growth in Q4, not in Q2 right now. It's the long-term growth. Yeah.
And maybe a question to both of you here in terms of, is there one metric that you guys particularly care about, or that brands should be tracking that they probably aren't right now, or are there many metrics? And what would be one for each of you?
Go, Krishna, I'll let you take that. Start.
I don't know, Teja, if there is one. If I was to really, really force myself to think about one, it would probably be the LTV to CAC ratio, but that's not as obvious sometimes, and the proxy for that wrongfully sometimes becomes tacos. But I think the real question is, the real answer, I think, lies in what Ash kind of said earlier. At every stage of the funnel, it's a different KPI. If I am investing in the top of the funnel, I'm not investing in it to drive my immediate ROAS or tacos or anything. I'm investing in it to grow my brand search, to grow my detail page views, and all that kind of stuff. So when we think about it, we think about each stage of the funnel having the appropriate set of KPIs, and all of those KPIs should add up to longer term growth for the brand and market share, and LTV CAC seems to reflect that pretty accurate.
Yep. And on that, Krishna said about 4 KPIs after he said LTV CAC. But the branded searches for me is one top of mind. It's kind of almost a very basic one if you just think about old school advertising theory on Amazon. But through learning and all what Trellis has taught and empowered us over the years, we're now seeing that if the brand is truly doing the full funnel advertising, branded search is it's not the only KPI, but it's a great KPI measurement of, are we actually now growing this brand awareness? Because it measures both online and offline and advertising anywhere. And I think all those worlds need to come together, as well as what we're talking about today. So I think it's a great barometer from that side.
Look, honestly, this has been very incredible, guys, across the board. A lot of insights, both, I think, on a CPG standpoint and how brands can differentiate themselves. And I think for everybody watching, right, a lot of the key takeaways here is whether it be healthcare or CPG, there's a lot of incredible opportunities in performance marketing, and also be really understanding your data and then being able to use that to solve specific problems that you're trying to address within the business and how you grow those brands. But at the end of the day, also having the right partners, someone like Ash, especially in the healthcare industry, or a tech partner, whether it be us or anybody else who knows how to do advertising, and having those partnerships in place there to help you guys navigate that world. And at the end of the day, grow your brands. Right. And so I think as a one last tidbit, if you were to say, per se, like, how Apple does the one more thing there, Ash, what's one of your key predictions for healthcare brands in the next 12 months?
Yeah, it's optimistic of me, but if I were to predict something, it's that I would like to see more and more brands incorporating marketing and advertising budget within their actual product pricing ladder. So at the end of the day, at the moment, they're kind of using whatever's left and they're being given to do advertising in some, it's percentages of what they're doing in overall revenue, which simply doesn't cut it. Amazon is pay to play, as we mentioned, but to be doing a real strong structure, you need to be building in strong margin per unit that you're selling out. So almost like an Amazon commission, build in marketing margin. And I think more brands are going to realize, how do we do it on our limited marketing budget? And they're going to structure their marketing accordingly.
And Krishna, maybe for you then, in terms of going into the Q4 of 2025, what should brands be preparing for?
I think 2 parts, 2025 and 2026 maybe. I think 2025, if there's one thing they can do, I would say get eyes on what is your lifetime value and if it is growing or not. I think that would be one thing I would say. Otherwise, it really becomes difficult to understand how much spend and where and whatnot. And I think longer term, the new Gen AI is going to fundamentally change how a lot of these things are going to happen. I know we are working on some stuff. I am sure other people are. I was talking to Ash. Ash is thinking of some of those. Excited to see what the future holds.
Beauty. And look, I know all three of us, and especially the two of you, can go on for ages here. And let's do this as a next segue here in terms of, look, anyone who's watching, right? If you want to connect with Ash, Krishna, or myself, shoot us a message, connect us on LinkedIn, and we'd always love to chat, whether it be strategy or just the e-commerce space or just about anything, honestly. We all love to yap, to be honest, and we love talking and learning from each other here. And so thank you, everybody, for joining us. It's been a pleasure, and on to the next one.